Right. It is 12 o'clock on Wednesday, which means it's time for an Iowa Learning Farms conservation webinar. I welcome everyone here. I am Matt Helmers with Iowa State University, director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center at the current time, and also a faculty affiliate with the Iowa Learning Farms. And so I'll get the great pleasure to help moderate these sessions. So really looking forward to our topic today. We have Jenn Ripp, that's with the Savannah Institute, talking to us about agroforestry. I'll let Jenn share her screen. So as always, if you have questions, feel free to type those in the chat box, and we'll get those to Jenn at the end of her talk. Is it working to share your screen?
Yep, just wanted to get it started at the
right place. Okay.
Yep, right place at the right time. Okay. Oh, I haven't done this for a month. I feel out of practice now.
Okay.
Okay, share screen. Here we go. Okay, can everyone see that?
I can see it on my end. So, yep, Jenn is an agroforestry educator with the Savannah Institute, and we'll be talking about incorporating trees to your farms with agroforestry. With that, Jenn, the virtual floor is all yours. As always, if folks have questions or comments, feel free to type those in the chat box, and we'll get those to Jenn at the end of her talk.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And it's a pleasure being here. I've watched several of the Iowa Learning Farm webinars and have very much learned a lot and enjoyed them. So good afternoon, everyone, and a happy solstice to folks. My name is Jenn Ripp, like Matt said. I'm an agroforestry educator with the Savannah Institute. I'm currently the only Iowa employee at the Savannah Institute, but we're looking to change things as we grow. I live in Decorah, Iowa, which is where I am located right now. And among other things, I grow apple trees here. For many of you, when I say production trees, something like an apple tree is going to come to mind, or a pear tree, or kind of more of the orchardy trees they're thinking of. But there's so many more options. I'm going to talk to you today about how trees can work with you and for you through agroforestry. We'll have plenty of time for questions, so please hold them until the end, and Matt's going to help me wrangle those in, and hoping for a lively discussion. So I was hoping to put up a poll, but it doesn't seem to be an option on this format. So I'm just going to start. Okay, so better title for this is Agroforestry, the right tree in the right place at the right time. And the poll was going to be asking who is familiar with agroforestry or has heard that term before. And then the second question was kind of a trick of, have you heard of windbreaks? Have you heard of riparian buffers? Have you heard of silvopasture? Because those are all agroforestry systems. So we'll set that. This is a poll from 2017 out of a paper that Keith Keeley, our executive director, partnered on. As you can see, there are these practices happening around the upper Midwest and the lower Midwest, Missouri, but it was slow progress. I hope that this graph is drastically changed from 2017, but unfortunately, probably not significantly. These are a lot of the early adopters, folks like Tom and Kathy down at Redfern Farm. And if you'll notice the rotational grazing, agroforestry, and then the pastured woodlands is going to be, in this graph, considered unmanaged pastured woodlands, kind of cattle just turned out into forests, and not the intentionality that agroforestry and silvopasture really tried to do. So why the right tree? Well, trees are great. Trees help make the most of your available resources, whether that's sun, and then on the reverse, shade for your livestock, soil, water, and land. Their connection between the generations. If you've ever had a tree, I'm thinking of a hackberry personally in my mom's yard that we can trace back to when the house was being constructed like 80 years ago. There's this little sapling there, and it's beautiful, and it really connects me with my ancestors that I've never met. So this is a nice old picture of an alley cropping system with a bit of winter wheat in there. you can all imagine the cooling, relieving effects of a tree has on after being in the field during weeks like this. In the last couple of days, it's been so hot here. Trees create a microclimate of cooler, moisture retaining shelter for you. And what do you think that 1-ton Black Angus thinks of a tree in the middle of a field? It is hot, and they're clamoring for it in a field. You know, I'll show a picture later of just one solo tree and like every cow just trying to get every piece of shade in that. Why not make the trees work, produce for you, produce with you, make the cows grow nice and big and stress-free? Like any crop, trees take maintenance and time and tending, but like any crop, they produce a product, whether that's timber, chestnuts, fence posts, apples. Trees are not the nuance that your granddad maybe have thought they were to be. It's not taking land out of production. I'm not going to be using that phrase because I don't believe in it. It's diversifying your farm to withstand the market and the weather. Can you convert 10% of your land to improve the performance of the other 90% and provide more favorable conditions for your livestock, for you, for your family when it's 110 degrees and 90% humidity, which will be pretty soon here? Trees are also 3D solar collectors. Think about the benefit of not just collecting sunshine from that 2D annual ground placement, but from the entire canopy of a tree. It's a pretty incredible resource. They dive deep into the subsoil to find nutrients and water where the annual root systems cannot. They survive in droughts and floods for decades. Okay, so next we're going to talk about soil health and agroforestry systems. This group is probably familiar with the term regenerative or regenerative practice in soil. It's adding organic matter to the soil to improve fertility and productivity. This is done in many ways. A lot of in this area are using cover crops to start on that regenerative process. And that's just the gateway. Next we have continuous living cover. And then we have trees. These are all part of regenerating the soil. And that means nutrient cycling, fungal bacteria, growth and optimization, regulating water. So that's going to be regulating large amounts of water and no amounts of water, and then structure, providing physical stability in the soil to support. In this next graph, we'll see, I like this graph because it shows what I think a lot of us have felt over the years of annual crop production. You can feel the soil be degraded, it's extracting from the soil and it's not really giving anything back. So this map on the bottom, on this x-axis is years. So if we think of year 0 as, you know, virgin tall grass prairie, and then it is just downhill from there. You are constantly agitating the soil, removing that organic matter and not allowing the soil to set up, to retain nutrients, to have structure. And so we just go down, 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 and active organic matter, slow release, and then passive organic matters. So, and then the mark at 100 years, we have grassland function restored, which is great. We're going to do one better with trees and regenerative practices. And you can see this like pretty intense uptick immediately upon starting these practices. Like anything in nature, regeneration takes time, and this does take time, but it is so worth it. And then, so this is the principles of soil health as the USDA puts forth. Some of you are probably doing some of these practices already, such as no-till or minimize disturbance, maximize soil cover through cover crops and continuous living cover. And we're going to really focus on maximize living roots. So continual root cover in the soil, or root integration in the soil, and then maximize diversity, because that really should be part of any plan that we talk about. I really like this graph because it shows kind of a little bit of each world. We're taking we're taking the best parts of a forest ecosystem, the best parts of an annual cropping system, and combining them for complementary sharing of nutrients, but with the benefit of that little loss or output from the system that forests do, because we have these roots continually absorbing nutrients and not allowing it to leach. There are reports of, like, on average 20% of nitrogen fertilizer is lost through surface runoff or leaching into groundwater. We could all use 20% more money, more this, more that. not spent on nitrogen fertilizers that are going into our water systems. We'll talk a little bit more about water quality too in agroforestry. So I really like this graph because it shows kind of this like, not perfect, nothing's perfect, but a really good marriage of what agroforestry is trying to do in the space that it lives in. Okay, and then just real quickly for the bacteria and fungus counts in your soil, this does a clear job of saying like you really want that balance to be growing annual vegetables. Trees like a more fungal environment, annuals like not necessarily more of a bacterial environment, but they want that balance too. And when we have soils that are dead of both of these things, we get a lot more weeds, we get a lot of these pioneer plants, the disturbed soil, the quack grass of the world and whatnot, and that's going to be the perennial grasses too. So trees help restore this fungal balance in the soils that is very hard to mimic with synthetic fertilizer or even inoculants. They do the real thing. And then trees benefit water quality. Like I was saying, 20% of nitrogen applied runs off and leaches into groundwater. We do this by surface water retention. So that's making sure that roots and organic matter encourage infiltration into the groundwater is going to be really important in keeping the streams clear. We'll talk about riparian buffers, and you can think about Beaver Creek. That has an amazing riparian buffer site as well. And then let's talk about yield. I love this graph because it is so simple in showing you all of the points that I'm trying to make. So drought is big. We just got 2 inches of rain here in the Decorah area, but we didn't have measurable rainfall for 5 weeks, possibly 6. I kind of forgot. Like if I was growing a lot more for myself, I'd be a little bit more. I'm also in this like valley that has its own microclimate too, but yield reduction in soybeans in a monoculture and drought is dramatic. That's almost 1/3. And if you look at the graph next to it, the soybeans and alley cropping, remember that although the yield starts out low, we're not accounting for the trees within the rows. We are just counting for the soybeans. We're not counting for the 10 to 20% of space taken up by the trees and the productions that they provide. So no significant yield reduction in alley cropping. We're going to talk specifically about alley cropping. This is just a really good graph to say, hey, trees help drought. They are not going to significantly reduce your yield. And then land equivalent ratio. This is great for farmers around that don't have a lot of land or are maybe maybe hesitant to take or to put more of their land into agroforestry production. It takes less space to do integrated systems like this. Agroforestry is integration. So if you have 88 hectares of agriculture and 60 hectares, sorry, this is a European study, of trees, combining them is going to give you a land equivalent ratio of 1.4. So you are saving space by doing the same amount of production. Okay, and now what is agroforestry? Hopefully most of you on the call are at least a little bit familiar with this, but agroforestry is taking the benefits and integrating and stacking this, taking the benefits of both worlds, of this forest world, of this agriculture monocrop and world, maybe not monocrop in this case, but annual world, and combining them, taking the benefits of integrating, stacking these systems in an intentional way, moving towards intentional systems, which will be important when we talk about silvopasture in just a minute. So this probably looks familiar. This is a familiar landscape to me, where you have this kind of like agriculture in one zone, nature in one zone, conservation in one zone. You have your CRP land, you have your cropland, and then you have your woodlands. I don't know if anyone's noticed it, but nature doesn't really work this way. Nature is more like a crazy bunch of kids that you're telling to stay in one corner, and all they want to do is like mingle and mash together and just kind of cover the ground and like be everywhere. And so agroforestry works with this idea of let nature do a lot of the work. Agroforestry is a powerful tool in improving soil health that we talked about, reducing erosion and runoff, diversifying your farm income, which will be important when inclemental weather begins to happen more frequently, and utilizing available resources, marginal lands, mitigating weather extremes like we were talking about, and engaging across generations. So planting that chestnut tree that your great-grandchild that you might never meet will be able to harvest. Well, they'll be harvesting along the way, but that sort of legacy building that trees have is a really powerful tool when we're talking about land transition right now, and folks wanting to do something different, wanting to keep their kids involved in the practice, wanting to keep their grandkids involved in the practice. It's time to start thinking outside of the box of how to keep people on the land farming and keep it profitable. So the 4 I's of agroforestry, I'll go over really quickly because we still have a lot to cover. Intentional, it is an intentional combination. Intensive management, this is not a passive system. These are all of these processes should be well thought out. Interactive, so that's going to be more of the closed loop system or closed circle system, and then integrated. Above all, integrated. None of these agroforestry practices stand on their own. They can, but they work best in integrated systems. So this can work for you. This image shows how it can fit your landscape and your farm plan and your life. And I really like this because it says you may even end up working less someday soon as you plant trees once, spend some years in establishment, and then it's routine maintenance until they start producing. Putting in the time to visualize your farm throughout the next decade is the front-loading work that people like myself at Savannah Institute want to help you with. Planting the right tree, the right place, and the right time is essential in establishing a healthy and vibrant agroforestry practice. And at one point, nature starts to kick in and really help you out with all of this. So I like this graph because I was similar to like the soil graph of, okay, do we have more sand? Do we have more clay? What do you want to see on your land? This is really about finding the systems that work for your goals and for your landscape. Do you want more livestock? Do you want more crops? How do trees look within both of those systems? So it's really just, it's a spectrum of agroforestry practices, and you don't have to go all in right away. It can be an incremental approach to slowly transforming your landscape and your farming business. You don't have to say, you know what, no more corn, only trees starting next year. Things like alley cropping are really beneficial in taking those little incremental steps in establishing trees on your landscape. So the USDA has 5 agroforestry practices. We're really going to focus on 2 of them. So we have windbreaks, which you're probably familiar with, repairing buffers, so that's along streams. Forest farming, not as common in Iowa that I know of. And then alley cropping and silvopasture. And behind is one of our campuses in Spring Green in Wisconsin. So I'll go through these quickly. Windbreaks, you probably are aware of the benefits of windbreaks and creating microclimates, stopping drift in a lot of areas too, preventing soil erosion through wind and water, etc. Repairing buffers, again, go check out Beaver Creek. They have a really, really intensive system that they've gone through multiple years in designing and implementing. That's keeping waterways cleaner. And as a recipient of the Upper Iowa in Decorah, I really appreciate repairing buffers upriver from me. It makes everything much nicer down here too. But really trying to stop the nutrient loss and runoff that occurs on the ground, that occurs on the surface from farming. Forest farming, not really going to talk about it. You can think about like shiitake mushrooms growing under canopy, things like that. Not as common here. Alley cropping, I'm going to go into that pretty in depth in just a minute. And then silvopasture. This is actually the background photo is from a farm in western Wisconsin. And yeah, cattle get let in after all the berries are harvested. So I'm going to refer to this photo several times because I think it does a great job in visualizing these systems on not just all happening at the same time, but being an extension of each other throughout time. So this corn soy parcel is going to be within the first 1 to 10 years of establishment. The trees are small They're just getting their start. They're not really taking up a lot of space or blocking any sunlight, but you're able to continue to do your practices with your equipment that you already have and keep turning a profit while these trees are being established. Alley cropping is defined as the planting of rows of trees and or shrubs to create alleys within which agriculture or horticulture crops are produced. That's the USDA definition. The trees may include valuable hardwood, veneer, or lumber species, fruits, nuts, and other specialty crops and trees, or desirable softwood species for wood fiber production. This can also be called intercropping. And then I like how we're moving along the timeline to the next decade, which is going to be the trees filling in more. This is probably between years 5 and 10. So maybe not in the next decade as much, but getting along there. So we have wheat being grown in the middle. And then at the end, after the trees come into full production and kind of start taking up more space in the alley, but still allowing sunlight to penetrate the canopy and grow pasture, we're going to be in the silvopasture round. So this is maybe 20 years out, 15 to 20 years out, depending on your tree crop species, which again, right tree, right place, right time. So some advantages to this, which there are many. These are the ones that kind of resonated with me. Being able to generate income while you establish trees, reducing wind and water erosion, enhancing crop production. I cannot stress that enough. You are creating an advantageous microclimate for your crops between these trees, improving soil health and fertility, sequestering carbon, which we're not going to talk about today, stop runoff, diversify farm income, and then utilizing existing implements. This is a really exciting way, as I mentioned before, to make incremental changes. I'm not asking you to sell your combine. I'm asking you to plan with your combine. So this sprayer is 40 foot wide, and so the rows are 80 feet wide. We have all of this information, documentation at our disposal at Savannah Institute, and I really encourage you to reach out if you're thinking about designing a system like this. Okay, potential drawbacks. This is a new thing to learn. This is a learning curve. It's alternative management involving root pruning to keep the roots going down and not out into your alleys. That's going to lessen competition and allow your roots to dig deep for those nutrient and water reservoirs. Limbing up is something that you're going to need to do to save your equipment and save the trees. It's mutually beneficial. And then things like tree guards. So just learning a different practice in perennials can be difficult, but it is not impossible. I did it a lot of years ago when I decided to stop annual vegetable farming because, well, my knees hurt. But there's a couple other things that are drawbacks or things to consider, like establishment costs, different marketing and market systems. We can talk more about the value chain and market later on in the discussion too. So I'm going to go through these really quickly. These are all of our farms, or some of our demonstration farms in North Central Illinois, just to show you that this is happening. This is happening around you right now. And there are a lot of resources for you to look to of people that have been practicing this for multiple years. We have a lot to learn out here. So more 4-H camp. This is more the nitty gritty of these. This is all available online as well, but I'm happy to kind of talk over this more specifically at a different rate. And then kind of our GIS mapping. So this is work that our technical service providers do. We're doing a lot of experiments out at this particular farm on tree establishment and trying how to battle tree establishment with ground cover. So using cover crops versus using herbicide, using weed mats, or using nothing at all, or using sheep. We're really trying to think outside of the box to find the best approach for each place. And then this is Hudson. I'm going to go through this quickly because we're running a little short on time. Again, all this is available online if you'd like to have kind of more specific nitty-gritty details on these. But I really like these photos because they look like Iowa. It's really similar to Illinois in the landscape. And like these are things that have been designed for Illinois and easily adapted to Iowa if we choose this. So, okay, and this is the last one. And I just like this overhead of saying, you know, any little spot that you want to try this out on, it is possible. Okay, and then this picture one more time because we are launching into silvopasture. Okay. So there's two kinds of silvopasture, or categories, I guess. By addition is what we're going to talk about today. This is a chestnut field at our Spring Green campus in Wisconsin. And by subtraction, which is a less commonly used in Iowa because, well, there's not a ton of forest in a lot of the states. So by subtraction is going to be things like goat restoration, where the goats in and they eat all the honeysuckle, or you thin the canopies to allow the pasture to grow underneath and cattle can roam. But we're just going to be talking about addition today. So this is going back to what I started this talk off with. This is silvopasture is not one lone tree. That tree is severely compacted around the outside of it. It is trampled down. There is not enough shade to go around for these cows. And we remember that 1 ton blank Angus in the field, heat stress is detrimental for cattle. Providing shade is essential in order to reduce heat stress. This is from a University of Kentucky study. Shade can reduce heat loads on cattle by up to 30%. Which in turn affect weight gains and reproduction. And for this case, there's not a ton of dairy operations that I know of around, but reduce output as well. It's understood at this point that livestock like shade. Another study suggests 14% weight increase in cattle providing natural shade from trees over artificial. So not only do we know they love shade, they love natural shade. And what can natural shade also provide? They can provide forage materials. They can provide food for your livestock. And again, this is the right tree, the right place, the right time. The right tree is what's going to also help you offset the cost of feed. It's going to help you improve your pastures if more intentional rotational grazing throughout these paddocks. It is the integrated 3 parts of shade and tree management, forage management, and livestock husbandry. So I'm going to give you a quick example of mulberries. Well, okay, Greg Judy first. If you're not familiar with Greg Judy's work, please go look it up. This man has been a pioneer in silvopasture on his farm in Missouri, and I learned something new everything I read or hear about him is something new that I haven't heard before that he's experimenting with. So there's Greg Judy and all his happy cows roaming around in Missouri. Okay, so forage of all kinds. This is a study on mulberries, which most people, when they hear mulberries, they think of like a nuisance tree for sure. But available tree crops that make great fodder, mulberries are one of them. But because pigs love it too, they actually, they pig out for it. If the tree is established, and they do the maintenance. So after the trees are established in these kinds of systems, these forageable trees, such as honey locust too is a great one. Once they're out of the danger zone of a pig totally ripping up and destroying them, they do a lot of the maintenance work for you. Like mulberries are a nuisance because they are prolific and they will have seedlings everywhere in your sidewalk, right? In the cracks, everything. If you have this in a system with hogs or with cows, those seedlings are not going to last long. They're going to get eaten because the leaves of mulberries are really, really nutritious, and your livestock know that. So they help do the establishment work. They help do the maintenance work on a lot of these trees. So check out our website. There's a lot of other forage and fodder materials, and also see this in action too. Wendy Johnson is part of our apprenticeship network. She's one of our mentors, as is Kathy and Tom. And she just put in, I think, 12 acres of silvopasture on her farm in Charles City. So we're hoping for a field day soon. And then this is how simple it can be too. Like if you are designing your fields for rotational grazing, you should be designing them for silvopasture too, because if you have the space to have permanent paddocks to rotate through, you have the space to line those with trees and have all of the benefits that I just talked about. And here, it's meant to fit you. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to explain Savannah Institute and show you a bunch of pretty pictures about the work that we're doing, and then we'll have time for questions. So this is our campus, one of our campuses in Spring Green, Wisconsin. That is about an hour west of Madison. We were able to do a combination of donation and purchasing of land out there in order to showcase all of the possibilities in transforming this landscape. So we're doing it there first in real nerdy ways. So this is an aerial view of what the farm used to look like and kind of all of the plans running through Eric Hagen's head, who's our farm director out there. And this is a photo from this year. This is going to be from the fall, so it's not, I mean, it's pretty, but you know, things are dying back. This is an opposite view of that last photo. So in the foreground, we have all of the hazelnut plantings and pretty intensive alley cropping between. They did some pretty awesome potato production last year as an experiment, and everyone was just astounded by like, wow, the potatoes grew so well. It's also the sand and the quality of the sand loam soil there as well. And then behind that is going to be the chestnut orchard. Each one of those chestnuts, the parentage is known, and each one of them are unique and being studied as part of our tree research program. And then this photo is from before because I just love it. But another view of those chestnuts. And we're actually going to be turning in sheep to these later this year to start grazing between rows in the alleys on the cover crops we've been planting, on the forages, fodders, forbs. So, and then one more photo. So this is also, you can see the rotations of the field and the different paddocks, not paddocks, but the different plots that we're using to trial hazelnuts. Okay, and then lastly, NRCS support is about these practices. Whether or not your NRCS agent is familiar with how agroforestry and NRCS work together to kind of be determined. So it's best to educate yourself on a lot of these practices and how you can have cost sharing measures for agroforestry. And if you have questions about that, that is what Savannah Institute is here for. We're here to help you navigate cost share and make these things possible. Okay, and I'm just going to skip through these real quickly too. But basically, Savannah Institute is a 501c3. We are located based now in Madison, but also have a base in Champaign-Urbana. One person in Iowa, but we're working on more. And we're up to 38 employees now. We just hired 5 more technical service providers, which is just talented folks from across the upper Midwest that are really passionate about agroforestry and about making real world plans with farmers in transforming their landscapes. So that's mobilizing resources, that's our demonstrations, that's the commercialization, the market chain, and so on. We have a really hefty, I'm going to skip this one, research department too that is looking at crop suitability. So this is for persimmons, and you can see on the graph, 0 is going to be not suitable, 1 totally suitable. Iowa looking really good for persimmon production, but we have folks on staff that are really smart doing all of this work. And that's it. I think I'm a little bit over time, but thank you for staying and watching, and I will turn it over to Matt now.
Great. Thanks, Jen. We do have some questions that have come in, but keep them coming in, and I'll do these last couple items. If you're on today and need a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW, at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today with your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Again, ALENAW at iastate.edu. And then if we can go to the next slide, a voluntary demographics survey. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out this survey, we'd really appreciate it. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to iowalearningfarms.org/survey and complete this. If you've done it in 2023 for one of our 2023 webinars, thank you very much, and you don't need to do it again. And last, a plug for next week. We have Dr. Matthew Streeter from University of Iowa that'll be here to talk about infield and edge of field opportunities for nutrient reduction at a community college. All right. Okay, Jen, we do have a few questions. I shouldn't take it. First off, what tree species are people using when alley cropping with corn and soybeans in Iowa?
In Iowa, that's tough to say.
Okay.
That's part of the tree suitability mapping. It's just something that I get to work on right now. because it's really the range of what you want to be working on. Chestnuts don't like all soil types. They're actually kind of picky in that way. But if you've ever grown a willow or a poplar, a hybrid poplar especially, you know they'll grow anywhere.
Yeah.
So picking the right crop and species is going to depend on what product you want and your timeline too. We really try to push kind of like more native tree species, oaks, things of that such, as our name implies, trying to restore oak savannas. But they're slow growing. If you want veneer, if you want black walnut, plant black walnut. That's going to be a little controversial for some in the effects, in kind of the allopathic effects of the root system. But I encourage you to be open-minded about a lot of the new science around that and how root pruning can dramatically decrease the negative effects of black walnuts on the surrounding crops. So yeah, I personally just got a bunch of trees from Wendy Johnson that she had leftovers to distribute around my community. And she was doing swamp white oak, pin oak, bur oak, black walnut, and then a bunch of Kentucky coffee trees, which maybe do a little research on those before you plant them, especially if you're going into silvopasture. There's some toxicity elements. Basically, if you have a giant Kentucky coffee tree that is just, producing and producing and producing, and you have a handful of livestock underneath just eating and eating, they're probably going to get sick. So in different quantities is something to think about before you start planting. But I personally am working on how to integrate apples into alley cropping systems for that sweet double crop. But that's a little bit trickier. Apple trees take more maintenance than something like a chestnut or a black walnut or something you're using for timber and just need to limb up. So it really depends how much work you want to put into the crop species that you're looking at, what your result is, and what your timeline is. So
okay. All right.
Right tree yard, place, right time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next one. Do the animals feed on the fruit or the leaves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my coworker Eliza Greenman is she's done incredible work on the science behind silvopasture. She has a great website called Hog Tree, and her whole design.
Hog Tree.
Hog Tree, yeah.
Okay, I'll go find it quick. So.
Yeah, so she does a lot of her work based in Virginia and North Carolina. She's a little more southern, but basically designing orchards in order to have pigs come in after full production and clean up all of the apples. That drastically reduces things like coddling moth and things that are going to overwinter in rotten apples. Mulberries, oh my gosh, the nutrient density in a mulberry leaf is something we're just beginning to understand. But wow, next time you see a mulberry tree, just say, oh, thank you. You're going to be really essential soon.
Well, but if it's a sucker that's in my yard, then it's not so, I'll try to have the new appreciation, Jen, but
that's not the right place for it.
Yeah, that's right. That is not the right place. Okay, sorry.
Exactly.
Okay, the next question, what fence system you use?
That's a good question. So we use 3D deer fencing, it's called. So it uses a minimal lines of electric. So the 3D part is basically you have an inner 2 to 3 line electric, and then you have an outside line, and then sometimes you even have a top line too, because deer know how to do this. They're not great at doing this, we're finding. So I would look up 3D deer fencing. That's what we're using on our demonstration farms. A couple of schools of thought in there too of planting more than you need, and the ones that grow are the ones that the deer don't eat. Not a huge fan of that. That's not really the intensive agriculture factor, but also relying on tree guards too. Tree tubes, growing tubes. We have a whole list of resources on ones that we suggest for that as well.
Great. Do you advise farmers one-on-one who are interested in considering options and ideas for their farm?
Absolutely. I'm not sure who asked the question. Are you located in Iowa?
Maybe this individual will type in where they're located.
Sure, yeah. So if
Yeah.
you're located in Iowa, currently we don't have any TSPs, technical service providers. Our team is growing. We had 3 technical service providers for the last 3 years, and now we have 8. So we are, like, they just started last week. We are building capacity in that department more than any other part of Savannah Institute. Unfortunately, as the sole Iowa employee, I will be able to kind of help you, but I'm not going to be able to do the GIS designs that these folks can. So what to say is there's a lot of resources out there that I can help you and guide you through, but the actual technical service providing that Savannah Institute does is only available in Wisconsin and Illinois right now.
Okay. Yeah, and this person is in Iowa, so yeah. So they can maybe
stay tuned.
There we go. So they can maybe be in touch, and by the time you work through some things, maybe there'll be that TSP in Iowa.
Yep, I am working on it. I want a buddy here so badly to help me do this work. But there's a lot of work to do in Wisconsin and Illinois right now, and we're trying to do all of that well before really expanding into Iowa. I want it to.
Do you have any TSPs available to advise in Missouri?
Missouri, no. But Missouri is going to be the Center for Agroforestry. So it's University of Missouri has an entire branch school that we work pretty closely with. A couple of my slides are actually from their research. I don't know if they're doing direct technical service providing right now. I know they do a lot on the research end, but
okay.
This is a bummer.
That's okay. Okay, couple more here. What are the positive impacts on birds, or have you looked at the positive impacts on birds?
For birds, yeah, that's actually, I took that out of a couple of slides just to not, just to kind of fit within the time window. But this is great for habitat. So you think of like prairie strips and pollination. One of the huge benefits of alley cropping is pollination. You're creating these little tiny ecosystem strips for birds. There is a lot of, I would say, there's a lot of thought process around grassland birds. And keeping grasslands for those species, and then kind of, right tree, right place is going to be the right place, but making sure we're not kind of kicking out grassland bird species that cannot have a tree within the eyesight. So I'm working with conservationists, especially in the Wisconsin area, to kind of how to do both. But yeah, so for birds, yes. For grassland birds, no, but we do have them in mind.
Okay, great. Another one, what about crop herbicide drift issues in alley cropping?
Definitely. Yeah, so that was, you guys are asking all the good questions. I took that out of a slide too, which is you're going to have to augment maybe your growing practices of what you're growing between your alleys if you have little trees established on the outside of that. So that's going to be a discussion with technical service providers. I'm happy to bring that question to them and see kind of how that factors in, but I don't have a good answer for you right now, unfortunately.
Okay. Do you have any experience or thoughts on using a native prairie strip as an understory for the first 8 to 10 years of tree establishment in the alley cropping, as opposed to cover crops or the mulches you described?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. My thoughts are excellent. Awesome.
Okay.
If you, especially if your soil is at a level where it can produce, it's already pretty healthy, like it already has been regenerated in some way, and it can support kind of those native plant strips. Cover crops are going to be to build the soil up around the base and also act as a weed deterrent. But native prairies, man, then you get the native pollinators, you get the native insects in there. Yeah, that's I would say close to ideal. Okay.
All right. I think that's pretty much all the questions, Jen. And thank you so much for the excellent presentation. It's somebody, I think one of the.
Oh, wait, we got Kathy.
Yeah.
Kathy, can you talk to us about native prairies?
Yeah.
Yes, I was, Tom and I were commenting that we wish native prairie would be a better cover crop for trees.
It's not.
But It's not the best. No, no.
Okay.
It's better than brome, but no. Or alfalfa. It's better than brome and alfalfa. Tom's
Okay.
shouting at me from the other room.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah, and these are so not the best as in like it's not returning anything to the soil, it's causing competition.
The prairie is too good at growing. It outcompetes.
Competes. Okay.
So
Okay.
it's wonderful to have the native there, but it
Mhm.
will outcompete the trees.
That's excellent. So if you guys are not familiar with Red Fern Farm, Kathy and Tom are the earliest adopters of this in Iowa. I think starting in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. Oh, you're
Yeah, early 90s, you could say. And I would say if you need information for Iowa, go to our website because we have
Mhm.
videos and handouts and stuff for people to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've done an excellent job as mentors to a very large community of people doing agroforestry around the country, really. Like I got into agroforestry. This is gonna embarrass you, Kathy. I got into agroforestry through Red Fern Farm. So if you have a chance to visit them, they're in the corner of Southeast Iowa. They have an amazingly mature, established chestnut orchard. And if you want to see these practices and really get wowed by the potential, like go see them.
I would attest to that too, because now I'm thinking, because it's Tom Wall, I think our ag engineering field specialist did a summer tour about 20 years ago right now, which was before I started work, but we toured some chestnut trees down in Southeast Iowa at that time. I was on that tour before I started at Iowa State. Well, I was going to be starting, so I remember it very well. So, wow. All right.
And I'm
Okay,
just gonna...
with that, I didn't have to go down memory lane there, but
That's all right. I'm just putting my
okay,
email into the
great.
chat. If you have any more questions or want to talk one-on-one about any of these practices, if I can't answer it, I will point you towards the person that can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jen. I'll put a plug
Thank you.
in next week. Get on webinar. Matthew Streeter from the University of Iowa will be talking. And if you need a CCA credit, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. And with that, thank you so much, Jen, and thanks for all the work that the Savannah Institute does. So,
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yep.